Welcome to Say More from Boston Globe Opinion. I'm Shirley Leung. Zohran Mamdani is the new mayor of New York, and his election last week has got me thinking. Even though we talk about affordability a lot, I'm not sure we talk about it enough.
We'll freeze the rents for more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants. Make buses fast and free. And deliver universal childcare across our city.
Between housing costs, childcare, and grocery prices, people are so stressed out right now, especially here in Massachusetts. The Boston Globe has been working for months on a project called Squeezed, about the shrinking middle class. Here's how Kris Hooks, the editor-in-chief of the Globe's Money, Power, and Inequality team, described it.
The middle class is shrinking constantly, and in part because either side of the middle class is growing. You got more people in the upper class, you got more people in the lower class, and everyone in the middle feels squeezed on either side.
Over the last couple weeks, I've been talking to the Globe team who worked on this project, Kris and some of the reporters. I can't say the project surprised me. It's not a secret that times are tough for people, but the intensity of the struggle took me aback. It's rough out here in Massachusetts. Right now, I'm in the studio with one of the reporters, Mara Kardas-Nelson, who's part of the Money, Power, and Inequality team at the Globe. Hi, Mara.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So one of the first things I want to do is establish definitions here. When I was talking to Kris, it seemed like there was no one definition of the middle class. So how are you defining middle class in terms of this project?
So for this project, we've defined it as someone who makes double to 2/3 the median income. So in Massachusetts, that's anywhere from $66,000 to $200,000, so a huge range. And of course, that varies a lot by geography, right? If you're in Greater Boston, being middle class and making $66,000, you're going to have a really hard time making it. You're going to need to be on the kind of upper end of that spectrum. Whereas in other parts of the state, having a lower income can still put you in that middle class category.
$200,000. I mean, that sounds like a good amount of money.
It does. There's been there's a study that shows that in order to buy a house in Greater Boston, you need to make an annual income of around $250,000.
Oh, wow.
So even that's above the middle class that we're talking about, right? So these are just to be able to get what we think of as kind of classic middle class things, a house, a car, stable daycare, things like that. We're pushing the upper end of that middle class, spectrum.
I guess that makes sense to me because the average cost of a house is like $1 million.
Exactly.
In Greater Boston. So that's just if you just want to live in Massachusetts, you need at least $250,000 just to have a roof over your head.
Exactly.
It sounds like.
Exactly.
So more than a number, it's a concept. It's an idea. It's the dream, right? Everyone wants to achieve being in the middle class. So, I mean, is that what your series try to dissect?
Yeah. So we looked a lot at kind of what people expect when they think they're going to be in the middle class. So it's things like, as we spoke about, having a house, having a car, having stable childcare, being able to have a child. These are things we kind of traditionally associate with the middle class. And a lot of the people that we spoke to are not able to do kind of the bare minimum of those things. So I'm thinking of someone named Sasha White, who's a music teacher in Dorchester. She makes $98,000 a year for a single person. Seems like an okay salary, right? And she said the thought of having kids is just, it's not even something she allows herself to think about because it feels so out of reach with her salary. She's dealing not only with day-to-day cost of living, but also with over $100,000 in student debt that she says she can't even think about because she's so overwhelmed by day-to-day costs. When I spent the day with her, she had planned out what she was going to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner down to the cent. So she knew how much her dinner was going to cost so that she could parse it out between 2 days.
Wow.
So these are things that we often associate with people who have, are maybe on kind of the lower end of the spectrum, hustling a little bit harder. And for someone who has this good job, quote unquote, she
almost
still
six
feels
figures she's
almost
making.
6 figures, and she's working 2 jobs. So she has a normal job, another job on top of that, and side hustles just to make ends meet. So we're talking about numbers here, right? We're talking about figures. We're talking about how much money people make, but we're also talking about a feeling, right? The fact that even people who make these quote unquote good incomes, and certainly what would be considered a good income in other parts of the country, are really feeling this constant squeeze.
So when we talked to Kris, he talked a lot about why the middle class feels squeezed in Massachusetts. It's because there's this gap, this widening gap between cost, huge run up in costs, and also wages. Wages have not kept up with costs. And so here's what Kris had to say about that.
Home prices quadrupling over the past 20 years, childcare expenses being among the highest in the nation, cost of getting a public degree has tripled since 1999. Like, all of these things you factor in and then think about wages essentially being stagnant.
There's this really astounding fact that I think kind of brings us home, which is that since 2006, the state's richest 5% have seen their incomes soar, earning 34 times more than the bottom 20%.
Wow.
And so when we all live in one state together, we live in close proximity. When you have so many rich people, that really pushes up the cost of living for everyone else. So that's part of why we see housing costs rise. That's why we see daycare costs rise. And at the same time that some people are getting really wealthy, we still have around the same percent of poor people. So those poor people are still kind of stuck at the bottom and not really able to get out and dealing with these higher and higher prices. One thing that Kris talked a lot about was this thing called the Massachusetts miracle, which kind of explains why we have so many high-income earners in Massachusetts.
Coming out of the industrial age, the Massachusetts politicians understood that they had to pivot somehow. Mills were closing, factories were closing. How do we figure out a way to have our middle class survive? Then comes the Massachusetts miracle. They start to invest in the big businesses that we see now: healthcare, tech, science, all of the stuff that Massachusetts and Boston specifically is known for. And one of the outcomes of that is people making more, people coming here to make more. And those essentially drive up prices for everyone else.
One thing that really got to me talking to Kris was about the generational dynamic here, that parents who could afford, who were working class, who could afford to live here, their kids who are in the middle class can't buy a house. They can't live the same lifestyle.
And this is, some data that came out some years ago from Ross Chetty at Harvard. Generations now are essentially never seeming to out-earn their parents or even getting close to it. The number is, for the people born after 1984, only half have out-earned their parents based on that study. So it's pretty startling.
This is actually a perfect segue into one of my favorite parts of the series. It really is about how the American dream has stopped for the next generation. And there's one example that Katie Johnston, our colleague Katie Johnston, featured. She describes this family. One generation could buy a home, but not the next. And I want to play some tape of her describing it.
So it started with Mary Greenaway. She came to the U.S. from a Caribbean island and opened a daycare in her basement of this two-family home she and her husband had been able to buy in Mattapan. And they bought this on his salary, working for Raytheon on the assembly line. And she was working in medical billing at the time. So they bought a home, right? Kind of unfathomable in this day and age. So then they got a divorce, and she was able to buy on her own a triple-decker in Dorchester, where she moved her business, raised her daughters, and then her oldest daughter lived on the second floor of that triple decker, opened her own childcare business. And then her daughter, so Mary's granddaughter, worked for both of them doing childcare. Right. And so Mary's still doing it, but her daughter closed her business during COVID when things got really hard. She now works in real estate. And the granddaughter went and got a degree in graphic design, and she got a job for a nonprofit that advocates for childcare workers. So she's still in the industry, but the younger generations realized that they weren't able to support themselves in the way Mary was able to on a childcare worker's salary. And so they moved in other directions.
Right. It is pretty amazing that within one or two generations, you're seeing someone who is definitely hustling and trying to make ends work, but she's able to buy first a home with her husband and then by herself. And then her granddaughter is completely unable to do that, right? This is a really, really fast change. So we're not talking over hundreds of years. We're talking about within 1 or 2 generations. People are feeling like what was attainable for their mom or their grandma is no longer attainable at all. And what really struck me about this with Katie's reporting and all the reporting that we did was just about how young people are feeling about this.
There's this incredible instability that young people feel today. And I pulled out a couple quotes from the people that I talked to because I just thought they said it best. So this one is from Nakara. This is Mary Greenaway's granddaughter, the childcare provider. She recently spent a year trying to find a job. And she told me this about her prolonged job search. She said, "I've been ignored. I've been scammed. I've been to interviews that led nowhere and they didn't say anything. There's just so many things that make me uneasy. I have a stable job, but the only thing I'm thinking of the future is, what is my plan B if this doesn't work out?" I talked to another 20-something woman who works as a legal assistant, and she said nothing's guaranteed as much as it was before. And another woman, she works in the mayor's office of housing. She makes $70,000 a year. She has 3 children. She used the word terrifying to describe her finances and said her job could, quote, go away in the blink of an eye. They all just had such profound worries about the stability of where there's just this uneasiness.
A lot of people are probably listening to this and nodding their heads that this is how I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what was really surprising in doing this project was this sense that people had of both how common this was, right? This sense of, I know that it's not just me. I know that I'm working as hard as I can, and yet I'm still not getting to where I think I need to go. But also a lot of shame, right? So it both feels very collective and very individual at the same time. One of the people that we spoke to is this woman named Jess Cunningham, who's a social worker, and she works mostly with younger people in their late teens, early 20s. And she said that a lot of the depression and anxiety that she's seeing among her clients, she attributes to financial stressors, both, everyday financial stressors, not able to make ends meet, but also this sense of I'll never be able to get ahead, no matter how hard I work, no matter how hard I try.
More of my conversation about the Middle Class Project after this short break. Mara, as you know, part of the project was people in the newsroom walking downtown, grabbing what we call man and woman on the street interviews, asking them about their thoughts on the middle class. I want to play some of the tape.
We're just living paycheck to paycheck. The idea that we're going to be able to afford our dream house, we're going to be able to raise a child, have a family, is impossible because it takes a full-time job to support one person. Now to be middle class means that you're sort of working yourself to the bone just to be able to survive.
They left Boston because they could not afford to rent an apartment and they couldn't afford to buy a house. 2 of my 3 children had to leave Boston for that reason, yes.
My understanding is you are able to pay your bills, live your life, and you are getting by. There's no issues. That's considered middle class.
Your paycheck is gone by the end of the month, or before the end of the month. So saving has gone. Trying to accumulate saving, I just don't see it happening.
But I just think the bar is getting farther and farther. It's the rich just continue to get richer.
I don't know what the middle class is. I really don't. It's lost to me.
I love that last one about I don't know what the middle class is anymore. And you can hear a little anger in their voices.
Yeah.
And we saw that play out in the election a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, given what happened with the election in New York and other parts of the country, I mean, how do you see affordability being embraced by politicians going into the midterms?
Yeah, I think people are really upset about this. And it's really interesting seeing political analyses in the wake of Mamdani's election, people saying, oh my gosh, affordability is the new thing. No, it's not. This is something that everyone's talking about all day, every day. It's something I talk about in my personal life. It comes up in our reporting. This is not new. new. It may just be new to the kind of political class. But this is very much on the tips of everyone's tongue. I think what's really interesting about Mamdani is that, Trump ran on affordability. One of his lines when he was running was "Make America Affordable Again," right? This was really important to him.
Day by day, we're making America affordable again. It's going to be affordable again at a really record pace. And, other people are going to take credit. All the mayors and all the governors, they're going to say what a great job. They didn't do a damn thing.
He focused a lot, though, on things like grocery prices. What Mamdani is doing is focusing on the much bigger drivers of both cost and inequality. So he's focusing on housing and daycare. And he's talked about how he's going to do that. It's going to be a huge hurdle. We'll see whether he's able to do it. But he's able to really focus and to focus on the big things that matter. And I think it's smart politically, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, to really look at where people are at. And people are really angry, and they want very specific, very real change.
So one of the things that Mamdani also talked about was passing a millionaire's tax in New York City. In Massachusetts, we do have the millionaire's tax, which was passed by ballot petition in 2022. It's basically a 4% surtax on people making incomes of $1 million or more. And so is that the solution? I mean, do you think that, it took almost a decade for Massachusetts to pass that, and all that money, lots of that, a lot of money's come in.
So it's exciting that we have the millionaire's tax here. It does potentially pave the way for other states, including New York and for Mamdani. But there is this sense of, okay, we have this on the books, and yet we're still feeling squeezed, right, in our daycare costs, our housing costs. So why is that? Why are we not? It feels like, okay, we've done the thing. We've taxed the rich, right? We've done the thing that's been promised. Why are we still feeling like things are so out of reach?
So the way the law is written is that this money can only go to education and transportation. And you think about, let's say, just transportation or just the T. It's been underfunded for decades by billions of dollars. So it's going to take some time for the millionaire's tax to really make a dent. And I do say that having the millionaire's tax gives the T a little more cushion. They can spend a little bit more to upgrade service. And I think they are doing that. I think you are seeing the T improve a lot. But you're right. It hasn't lowered the cost of housing in Massachusetts for a lot of people. It hasn't lowered the cost of childcare. And maybe someday the way the millionaire's tax should work is that if there's this dedicated stream to go to education and transportation, that frees up money in the budget that was supposed to go to education and transportation. Perhaps it can go to housing now. Perhaps it can go to other buckets that will make the middle class feel more financially secure here. I want to end on how this whole series began, and this is from Kris Hooks, the editor of the project, and his own experience growing up poor in Sacramento. And now that he's an adult, actually a father, a new father, he's squarely in the middle class now in Boston, but it's not a comfortable feeling.
I have, actually on my phone, I just created this list a long, long time ago, a list of houses and apartments that we lived in from the time that I was born to the time that I graduated high school. It's 18 years. There's 21 places on that list.
Wow.
Living on a single parent income. Sometimes there were evictions. Sometimes it was a matter of, trying to get out of a place that didn't make sense for my mom financially and in terms of getting to and from work. Financially, maybe I made it. When you look at how much my wife and I make a year, technically we're middle class. So we made it to that. We made it out of, what I grew up in. But I don't own a home. I don't know if I'll ever be able to own a home in Boston. We would love to put down roots here. We would love to have our kid live here for the rest of her life. I don't know what that looks like. The things that, we were not necessarily promised, but, winked at. Hey, if you do this, you'll have this. And it doesn't quite feel that way.
So, Mara, what do you want people to take away from this reporting project?
I think the thing that's really remarkable about this is how many people are feeling the same, right, across a variety of backgrounds, jobs, industries, locations across Greater Boston, that there's a real commonality here. And I hope that our readers feel that they're not alone in this struggle, that this is something that people across Greater Boston are facing, and also that people really want change on this. I think that the Mamdani win and also the wins across the elections 2 weeks ago really show that affordability is the issue of the day and that people are demanding change.
Mara Kardas-Nelson is a reporter on the Money, Power, and Inequality desk here at the Globe. We also heard from project leader Kris Hooks and reporter Katie Johnston. We're going to link to their project in the show notes. Mara, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Say More is a production of the Boston Globe. Today's episode was produced by Anna Kusmer with Globe Newsroom audio from Olivia Jarvis. Our editor is Jim Dow. Our engineer is Zuzair Ahmed. If you like the show, please follow us and leave us a review. You can email us at saymore@globe.com. I'm Shirley Leung. Thanks for listening.